Welcome back to the Crime Era channel, where every crime leaves behind a trail. Some are solved. Others remain buried in mystery. They thought loyalty would protect them. They thought a pact of blood would make them stronger. Instead, it became their death sentence. This is the chilling story of how a criminal group's vow of brotherhood doomed its own members. In the shadows of society, where law and order seem a world away, loyalty isn't just a virtue, it's a currency. For some, it's the only thing they have. But what happens when that loyalty is twisted, weaponized, and turned back on those who swore it? What happens when a bond meant to ensure survival becomes the very instrument of destruction? We're about to delve into a world governed by a single, unbreakable rule, a rule sealed not with ink, but with blood. A world where the promise of family hides a far more sinister reality. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will change the way you see loyalty, power, and betrayal forever. Our story begins in the forgotten backstreets of a city struggling under the weight of economic decline. This is where a small circle of individuals, desperate for a foothold in a world that had cast them aside, decided to forge their own destiny. They craved power, not just for wealth, but for the respect and security that had always been denied them. They needed a way to guarantee secrecy, a way to ensure that no one would ever break ranks. And so, the Pact was born. This wasn't just a handshake or a spoken promise. This was a blood oath, a solemn gang initiation ritual designed to bind its members for life. In a dimly lit room, far from prying eyes, new recruits would perform a ceremony that was both ancient and terrifying. It was blood. A ritual meant to seal loyalty forever. This act was more than symbolic, it was a psychological chain. By mixing their blood, they were told they were becoming one entity, a single, unbreakable force. The founders understood the power of this ritual. It created an immediate and visceral bond. The criminal brotherhood they were building would be different, they claimed. It wouldn't be about individual gain, but collective strength. The oath was the foundation of everything. Break it, and you weren't just betraying a group, you were betraying a sacred covenant, a part of yourself. This initial promise of absolute unity was intoxicating, drawing in those who felt they had nothing else to lose. But the very thing that made the pact so powerful would also become its most fatal flaw. Why would anyone willingly join such a group? The answer is simpler than you might think. For many, it was about survival. On the streets, being alone made you a target. Joining the group offered immediate protection, a shield against the dangers of their world. Then there was the lure of money. The group promised a life of financial freedom, a stark contrast to the poverty many recruits were trying to escape. But the most potent draw wasn't protection or money. It was the promise of belonging. Many who joined were young, vulnerable, and came from broken homes or disenfranchised communities. They were searching for an identity, a family. The group's leaders were masterful manipulators of this deep-seated human need. They'd look a new recruit in the eye and say, "You've been alone for too long. But that ends today. We are family now. Family above all." This message was incredibly powerful. It offered an emotional anchor in a chaotic world. It promised unconditional acceptance and support. The recruits weren't just joining a criminal enterprise, they believed they were being welcomed into a true brotherhood. They finally had people who got them, who had their back no matter what. This psychological pull was the group's most effective recruiting tool. They were selling a dream of unbreakable bonds and unwavering loyalty. A dream that, for a while, seemed real. But this promise of family was a carefully constructed illusion, and the cracks were already beginning to form, hidden just beneath the surface. Once you were in, the dream of brotherhood quickly revealed its true nature, a cage of control. The group's leaders maintained their power not through genuine loyalty, but through a trinity of fear, secrecy, and indoctrination. Fear was the primary tool. Stories circulated about what happened to those who disobeyed, stories that were just true enough to be terrifying. Every member knew the ultimate rule: betray the group, pay with your life. There were no second chances. Secrecy was absolute. Members were taught to live double lives, to never speak of the group's activities to outsiders, not even to their closest loved ones. This isolation served a dual purpose. It protected the group from law enforcement, and it severed the members' ties to the outside world, making the group their only reality. Indoctrination was constant. The mantra "family above all" was repeated until it became a reflex. Questioning an order was framed as questioning the family itself. This systematic brainwashing eroded individual thought, replacing it with blind obedience. Once you joined, you didn't just sign up for loyalty, you signed away your freedom. Think of a young member who, after seeing the group's true colors, wanted to leave. He couldn't just walk away. The moment he expressed his doubts, he was branded a potential traitor. His brothers would watch his every move. He'd be reminded of the blood oath, of the fate that awaited those who broke it. Another member might question a particularly brutal order. He wouldn't be met with discussion, he'd be met with suspicion and intimidation. Are you with us or against us? That was the only question. The promise of family was a leash, and it was getting tighter every day. For years, this system of control worked. The group grew in power and influence. But structures built on fear are inherently unstable. The turning point came not from an outside threat, but from within. The first crack appeared as a whisper of internal betrayal. A high-ranking member was suspected of skimming profits. The accusation, whether true or not, planted a seed of doubt that spread like a virus. Suddenly, the brothers who had sworn to die for each other were looking at one another with suspicion. This internal paranoia was amplified by rivalries within the leadership. The founders, who had once been united, now saw each other as competitors for power. Small disagreements escalated into silent wars. Alliances shifted, and whispers of plots filled the air. This internal rot couldn't have come at a worse time. Law enforcement, which had been circling for years, finally started making breakthroughs. The pressure mounted. Arrests were made, and the threat of long prison sentences loomed. This is when the Pact, the sacred blood oath, began to twist into something monstrous. Leaders started using the betrayal clause as a weapon to eliminate rivals. Was someone a threat to your power? Accuse them of talking to the police. Was another member questioning your authority? Brand them a traitor. The pact that once promised safety became the chain that dragged them all down. The brotherhood was crumbling, not from external attacks, but by consuming itself from the inside out. The final chapter of this story is written in blood. The pact, once a symbol of unity, now became a death sentence. The group turned its brutal enforcement inward. Members suspected of disloyalty, often without any real proof, were hunted down by their own. The very brothers they had shared meals with, the men they had sworn to protect, became their executioners. There was no trial, no mercy. An accusation was enough. A member might be summoned to a meeting, only to walk into an ambush. These weren't just punishments, they were messages. Each execution was a brutal reminder to the remaining members, no one is safe. The paranoia reached a fever pitch. To prove their own loyalty, members were sometimes forced to participate in the execution of a friend, a horrifying test of allegiance. The terror didn't stop with the members themselves. To ensure silence, the group began threatening families. Wives and children became collateral, pawns in a deadly game of control. The promise of family above all was now a grotesque lie. The group was destroying the very families it had sworn to protect. There was no way out. Leaving was a death sentence. Staying meant living in constant fear, waiting for the moment when suspicion would fall on you. The brotherhood had become a prison, and the only escape was death. A pact of blood was meant to unite them. Instead, it destroyed them. It turned brother against brother and transformed a promise of protection into a mechanism of terror. This is the truth about criminal brotherhoods. Loyalty built on fear is never loyalty at all. It is a prison with no escape. The very oath that was supposed to make them strong became their greatest weakness, a self-destruct sequence hardwired into their DNA. If this story shocked you, hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into the shadows, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe loyalty in crime is ever real, or is it always a death sentence? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.